Assalamu alaikum everyone, welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to discuss 9 important elements that we need to write and compose a good speech. Pakistan में declamations का एक concept है, where you go and you have a memorized speech and you talk upon a topic. Sometimes there are two sides to the topic and they call it a debate. So today we're going to learn how we're going to write a good speech for declamations and debate. So without further ado, let's get started. So this is a document and we're gonna discuss these 9 elements that are required to write a good speech. So starting with that, how to write a speech for declamations. We shall have to follow the following protocol in order to establish a well-structured speech that satisfies all the elements that are required of us. And whatever I feel necessary in a declamation, I have jotted it down over here. So let's get started. With the first element is attention capture. So when you start a speech, the most important thing for you is to make sure that you capture the attention of the audience as soon as you can with words that are easily relatable and not based on boring factual information. So what you essentially need to do is when you start a speech, you need to speak something that captivates the audience, something that draws their attention. Because if you're not lucky, your number might come like after 50 speeches and the jury and the audience isn't really interested in listening to so many speakers. So here's how you can grab their attention. And once you have done that, you have grabbed their attention for the next 2 minutes. Here's an example. It is a declamation that I recently participated in. And the topic was journalism dictates our emotions. So here's a sample speech as well. Now, let's read the starting first. Mr. President, I am the very pen you're having right there. And I want you to worship me. So when you called upon Mr. President was instantly alarmed that I have been called out. And when you say, I want you to worship me, this line has shades and shades of meanings. So when you deliver this line, you'll actually grab attention of anyone who's left out. And then you build upon that. So we'll be moving on towards the next element, antithesis. So essentially, antithesis is the exact opposite of what you stand for. So if you're talking about planting trees, talk about deforestation. If you're talking about a clean and green land, talk about pollution. So you need to build an image of the exact antithesis of what you are standing for, right? So let's go back and let's find out an antithesis. Here, I think this is a good example of an antithesis. Break the pens, lock the tongues, ban the expression, make people formulate their own opinions. Am I saying that? Well, yes and no. Mr. President, journalism isn't a wild animal. It questions the injustices and keeps the authority in check. So what's happening here is you are actually giving them an antithesis of what you might have wanted to say, but then you're correcting them and then you introduce your stance later in the paragraph. Going back, rhetorics. So rhetorics, as most of you might already know, these are questions that do not demand an answer. And when you use rhetorics, it is very essential that you make sure that you have strong valid points behind them. Rhetorical questions are important because you are questioning. So when you're saying a sentence, for example, planting trees is important for our future generations, converting it into a rhetoric. Is planting trees that important for our future generations? Or don't you think planting trees is important for our generation? What would you say to the generation that is coming up? So this question does not desire an answer from the audience, but this question is thought provoking, because human minds are programmed in a way that when you ask questions, they are triggered sooner than when you tell them sentences, because questions demands an answer from them. And even if they don't speak it up, they start this whole thinking process in their brains, and that is what you need to do. Coming up towards the build-up. So once you've given your introduction, and once essentially you've done the attention capture of the audience, what you want to do is the build-up. And what actually the build-up means is to build your case. And how exactly do we do that? So once the speech had introduced, I am the pen you're having right there and worship me, the case was introduced, where the speaker says, worship me for I bind your thoughts to mine, which implies that the speaker is imitating, the speaker is personificating a pen, and the speaker wants to deliver the whole idea of what is the extent of the power that a pen carries. And to put it into words, the speaker says, worship me for I impact minds, I am a keyhole that people try to widen, I make the victim a criminal and I make the criminal slate clean, for I can do wonders, and that goes on. So that is how the whole build-up happens, and the build-up continues till like the third and fourth paragraph. Now, let's talk about factual arguments. Your speech is incomplete without factual arguments, but I do agree that giving factual arguments is the most boring part of your speech, and essentially nobody would be interested while you be putting out numbers out there about research. So what you need to make sure is whenever you put out factual arguments out there, you need to ensure that they are connected with an emotion that the audience and you are trying to establish a connection on. For example, once you've established the connection using the whole worship me idea of pens, the speaker goes on and says ballistic missiles, nuclear bombs, and bioweapons. Nothing, my lord, has the power to crush nations. Every Japan, Afghanistan, and Palestine will stand back up again stronger than ever. So, this is how you tell your history with rhetorics, with good connection to emotion, and with good reasoning. And this is how you do not make your facts boring. Melodramatic arguments. It's essentially the same thing. But the real deal in melodramatic arguments is when you use the whole ideology of dissing something, जिसको हम उर्दू में कहते हैं तंजिया अंदाज में किसी चीज़ के बारे में बात करना. So what the speaker is doing here, even in the first paragraph and then later on and then in the third paragraph as well. Why do we stand here? Why do we stand in a society where corruption is validated? Journalism. Now there are two ways of saying that. Why do we stand here? Why do we stand in a society where corruption is validated? Journalism. That is an angry way of the typical way that the speeches are delivered. On the other hand, if you go on like this, why do we stand here? Why do we stand in a society where corruption is validated? Journalism. And this melodramatic way increases your chances of getting through and connecting and delivering your idea to the audience and the jury. Moving on towards the next element. The next element is resolutions. So when you need to make sure that when you're giving your speech, it must contain at least 2 resolutions to whatever problems that you're putting out there. If you are concerning a problem, since the given speech is not about a problem, it's about a general idea of yes or no, it's more like a debate, so we do not need to give resolutions over here. So we have to move on to the next argument. But in case you're talking about a problem, for example, you're talking about the increasing, you're talking about patriarchy, or you're talking about corruption, or you're talking about social injustice, you need to make sure that you give your resolutions in there, and they need to be unique and they need to stand out. Number 8, your stance, apparent and real. So when you're out through with your speech and when you when you approach towards the end, you need to make sure that when you give your stance, it needs to be clear to the audience. And if we look at this example here towards the end, yes. So first, an antithesis of what the audience might have assumed the speaker was trying to say. And then the speaker cleared out and addressed the next element as well, which is being relatable and uniqueness. So here what happened was that the speaker gave an antithesis and then made his own stance very clear. And the stance was that I stand for unbiased and transparent journalism, and that has been made apparent by giving factual arguments in the last paragraph. One thing that is absent over here that I really would like to mention over here is the use of the opposite stance. So if you are debating, you need to give arguments of the opposite stance. You may find one argument that talks about, journalism isn't a wild animal, it questions the injustices and keeps the authority in check. I would have appreciated if we add a detailed argument of the opposite side, so that you make sure that you cover all shades of opinion in your speech, and that gives you an edge of tilting the jury and their decision towards your side. Number 9 is uniqueness and being relatable. Whatever material you use in your speech, either it is humorous or serious, you need to make sure that there are points where the audience can easily relate to what you're trying to say. For example, here in the whole rhetorical paragraph, the speaker says, "So tell me, where do your emotions lie? Does it not trigger you? Do you not share every single post of injustice on your social media handles, regardless of the sources? Do you not spread forwarded text messages just to make sure that you do not die in the next 10 days? These are some things that all of us have done at some point in our lives. And there should be a great deal of content that is relatable with the speaker. Now, apart from these 9 elements, there is one more thing that we need to address, and that is you need to make sure that it is a speech that is typed on the computer and not a handwritten speech. I was a really passionate advocate of handwritten speeches, but then I learned about the concept of locus memorization. What happens is that every single word written on a piece of paper that you have printed from your speech written on a computer, you remember each and every word exactly at its own place on the paper. So when you're delivering your speech and you've memorized it, you are playing a whole image of that page in your mind and reading every single word from there. So if you have written a handwritten speech and you lose it, or khuda na khasta, if something happens to that speech, it gets torn away and you need to write the speech again, it is very unlikely that you will write every word at exactly the same place as it was written before. Thank you so much for making it towards the end of the video. That was it for writing a good speech. If you still need more help, I have linked my Instagram down below and you can easily reach out. Apart from that, I have linked 2 sample speeches on the topic of journalism dictating our emotions in the description below. You can open it, you can read through them, you can even use the content if you want, no problems at all. And even apart from that, I've also linked the 9 elements document down below with some descriptions, and you can go through that and you can easily use it if you want. If you have made this far, please do subscribe and leave a like down below. If you think that any of your friends are going to do a speech anytime soon, make sure that you share the video with them. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in. Allah Hafiz.